It's the AC/DC Beyond the Thunder podcast. With your host, Kurt Squires. It's time to rock.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of AC/DC Beyond the Thunder, the podcast where extraordinary fans salute this extraordinary band. I'm your host, Kurt Squires, and along with cohort Greg Ferguson, we both set out to scour the earth to find those chosen few whose lives have been blessed in some way, shape, or form by these legendary rock and roll Hall of Famers known as AC/DC. Today's guest is none other than the inimitable Dee Snider, singer, songwriter, radio personality, screenwriter, yes, even actor, but best known as the frontman for Twisted Sister, a band formed back in 1976. Dee, thank you for joining the ranks with us here today, here in the seediest bar that we could find in Long Island, New York. Sorry about that. Actually, not too far from where you grew up in Astoria, Queens. One of the main criteria for being a guest on Beyond the Thunder podcast is without a doubt being a lifelong AC/DC fan, and it's just coursing through your veins. But there's always a starting point, right? There's always that first time that you heard the band. So Dee, tell us the first time you heard AC/DC. Where were you? What was your reaction? Was it immediate? Did it take some time getting used to?
I clearly remember the first time I heard AC/DC. It literally changed my life. I mean, it really did. But the first time I heard them was at a club called the Gemini North in Yorktown Heights, New York, 1970. I'm guessing 8 or not. 8, I'm guessing. This place was one of the first places to have video screens, big TV screens, and they would show movie footage that they would get their hands on. This is predates video, but they would air Midnight Special.
Yes.
And they had all the bands, and they were playing this band called AC/DC, doing Sin City. And I was completely blown away, completely taken by the band. Probably first was Bon Scott's voice. Coming from that high, raunchy singing style, Alice Cooper background and whatever, Bon's voice spoke to me. And at that point, I'd say he was my last major vocal influence, changing my vocal stylings to where they eventually became whatever the Dee Snider voice is. But Bon had a huge effect. And then, I was a mover on stage, and seeing, my band were movers, but seeing Angus just thrashing around the stage. But I saw AC/DC at Midnight Special, immediately sought out their albums, immediately started listening, studying, changing the way I was writing music. Up till then, I was into very, busy metallic music, and here I was reintroduced to the simplicity of straight-ahead 3-4 chord rock. That completely changed me. And one step further, when I was doing Heavy Metal Mania to spread the word, to turn people onto new music, Twisted Sister was very big on doing that in the clubs. We're your pipeline. I'm your pipeline. We want to expose people, to band. Right. And AC/DC was one of those bands you just had to share.
And I'm glad you brought up the topic of sharing, because when AC/DC had only been around for 5 years or so, like when you were first introduced to their music, I remember those days as an early fan being looked at like I had two heads being associated with a band like AC/DC, right? Like it would take years, even after Bond had died, for AC/DC to lock in with the rest of the world as being a credible band. Were you selling AC/DC as hard as you could back then?
Being one of the original AC/DC fans, I was, champion them. And like so many people do when you find a band that nobody knows about, I call it the diamond in the pocket theory. That when we find a band that nobody knows about, basically we found a diamond. And we have the diamond, and we're carrying that diamond with us, and we know we've got a diamond, but nobody else knows we have a diamond, and nobody else knows it's a diamond. And for some reason, we pull it out, it looks like a lump of coal to them. To us, it's clearly a diamond. Can you see this diamond? And we do everything we can to display that diamond, to share that diamond. We wear the and I'm going back to the band. We wear the band's name. We write it on our school books. We jam it down people's throats. We blast in our car. And then, with any true diamond, comes a day that everybody realizes it's a diamond. And all of a sudden, everybody starts crowding around. And everybody's pushing you out of the way because they want to see the diamond. And all of a sudden, you're at the back of the pack looking at the diamond that you had in your pocket that nobody would even listen to you and take you seriously about. You've been trying to tell for years, and now they now know it's a diamond?
Right.
And even worse, my favorite line, of course, and this makes everybody nuts, and as an original Queen fan and an original AC/DC fan, hey, did you get AC/DC's first album, Back in Black? Hey man, Brian Johnson sounds a little different on their second record, Dirty Deeds. You just want to choke the life out of people.
Right.
So, but as a guy who carried that diamond, and my band did too, and as someone who cheered them on, and I'm proud to have been one of the original people cheering. I'm proud that they have not let me down.
They don't let you down, do they?
They don't let you down. They don't. I know I've disappointed fans when they thought that we changed, went commercial or whatever, and whether it's true or not, there's a point of disappointment. AC/DC has never disappointed me. They've never let me down. And, and as a fan, what more can you ask?
Being in the business for so long, what was your first connection to AC/DC once you made it through the ranks with Twisted Sister? Because you never toured with AC/DC, but you were on the same record label with Atlantic, correct?
My manager's name is Phil Carson. He was the head of Atlantic Records Europe. He signed AC/DC.
Right. Phil's a very important guy.
Okay. He signed Twisted Sister, and he signed ELP and ABBA and Yes, and so the guy's has an amazing track record of music. But he signed AC/DC, and he signed it. And this isn't the story I'm going to tell you, but it was like 2 a.m. He had met a girl in a pub who was somehow related or connected to the AC/DC camp, and she was in England trying to get someone to take a look at the band because they had a deal. They had the 2 albums out in Australia. Mm-hmm. So she had a 16 millimeter projector with a 16 millimeter film of them doing It's a Long Way to the Top. They're one of those deals that you'd set up, like this is very old before your time, but you would open up the case and there would be a screen built in and you project it.
Right.
And Phil brought it to his office and she set the camera and he watched them in a club doing It's a Long Way to the Top, and he said, I want to sign them. And she said, are you kidding me? And he said, no. He's the only person in the record industry that I have any kind of ongoing relationship with. Is a dear friend and the guy who's like always, even he's a guy who trusted his gut, and you never see that at higher levels of in record companies. Once they get up out of, they sign a big band and they get promoted out of an A&R position, they lose their sack. They're afraid. But this guy, he signed Twisted Sister, even though we've been rejected by Atlantic Records 5 times in America. He signed AC/DC based on a tape, and they called up, got Angus on the phone and said, hello, I'm Phil Carson, I'm the head of Atlantic Records, I'd like to sign your band.
Wow, it's amazing. I love that story. It's talk about a milestone moment in a band's career. When AC/DC talks about their roots, who they've been musically influenced by, it's not always who you'd expect. It's not necessarily the bands from the 60s and 70s, but rock originators like Bo Diddley and Muddy and Jerry Lee and Chuck and Little Richard. And as a kid, if you told me that Tutti Frutti was the song that changed Angus's life, I'd be like, what? But now I kind of get it.
I was always been very confused by AC/DC's influences, like where it came from. I knew it came from basic rock and roll. I would assume Stones and I would assume The Who,
right.
Yet I couldn't make a clear connection. To hear that they say it's more from the 50s, I could see it. Mm-hmm. Bon Scott's vocal stylings. I mean, coming out of Little Richard, I could see it. So I mean, and whatever it was, it is wholly unique. And the success of AC/DC, the recognition that they get, it gives me faith in the world. It makes me think that maybe there is a God, because a lot of times you wonder. But when a band like this gets appreciated and recognized the way they should be.
On their terms.
On their terms.
Yeah.
On their terms. That's the thing. They've never done anything but be AC/DC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just what they do. It's what they do and how they do it, and they love it. And they're unrepentant, unapologetic. They shouldn't be, and they're defiant.
That's an excellent point, Dee. And it actually makes me wonder, AC/DC has, for all intents and purposes, become a huge brand. It's big business. You're not only hearing AC/DC everywhere, but you're seeing that logo everywhere. And it's so curious to me how they created this genre unto themselves from a sound that on the surface sounds completely simple, but clearly isn't. How did AC/DC essentially become the Pied Piper of hard rock? And how did it affect you and your band?
Well, AC/DC is certainly one of the biggest bands in history, one of the biggest selling bands in history. There's no doubt they get their props. They've sort of moved to this new level of just respect and admiration, and it's just, AC/DC radio and Walmart carrying AC/DC, and and the tours selling out, like people are just hungry for AC/DC shows and airplay immediately just because it's AC/DC. That's great, but I never hear people talk about the long-term effect that they had on music. Mm-hmm. They didn't just change me. They changed, I want to say everybody, but so many bands started studying the simplicity of AC/DC, studying the structure of an AC/DC song, studying the straight 4 beat, which is essentially a variation on a disco beat, but I excuse them. But and using that as becomes the backbone of so many bands. Boom, da, boom, da, boom, da. Yeah. Yelling how many angry drummers there were in the world because the bands were telling them, no, dude, not boom, boom, da, boom, no, boom, da, boom, da. So I'm not a metronome, too bad. AC/DC's got it. The pulse, the drive, Now,
are you talking about pre-Mutt Lange AC/DC or post-Mutt Lange?
Now, you listen to Mutt Lange pre-Back in Black. There is no evidence of what I think became the Mutt Lange sound and the Mutt Lange song structure, but suddenly he goes to AC/DC school. AC/DC did not go to Mutt Lange school. Credit to Mutt Lange, for tonalities. He made a great sounding album, brought out some of the best performances out of Brian Johnson, really made him work at the lead vocals on those records. And some of their greatest songwriting structure. Certainly, I think Mutt was great at pushing bands to be more.
Totally agree.
But he walked out of there going, oh boy, did I just get a new arsenal of tricks. And all of a sudden, it's Def Leppard. Boom, da, boom, da, boom, da. The AC/DC groove. And all of a sudden, every band that he works on, he's taking it to Billy Ocean. He's taking it to Shania Twain. He's taking the AC/DC. That it became his basics, the basis. Sure, he spun off, but it was the basis, what he learned from that AC/DC, those 3 AC/DC albums, right? Highway to Hell, Back in Black, and For Those About to Rock. Right. He learned a lot. And then you go beyond that. ZZ Top, the Eliminator record.
Huh.
Come on. That was an AC/DC album.
Really?
For the love of, I love ZZ Top, but all of a sudden, what happened between, whatever, the previous, their album and Eliminator?
That's a fair point.
They changed everything. Hell, they're using a drum machine. But, because Frank Beard couldn't play like that straight. But the fact, and yet no one seemed to me, no one ever seemed to mention or give them their due. The hair metal scene, the majority of the hair metal bands, boom, da, AC/DC. And it's more than just the bass drum and snare. It was the drive, the down, 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 down. I was always the first to say they changed the way I viewed music. They made me realize it didn't have to be busy. It didn't have to be complicated.
Right.
You know, pre-AC/DC, it was songs like Under the Blade, and everything was like that, you know, busy, a lot of parts. And then that's just the beauty of a sledgehammer, you know?
The beauty of a sledgehammer. Awesome soundbite. So you had mentioned Under the Blade. Shoot 'Em Down just so happens to be my favorite Twisted Sister song. And that track definitely has an AC/DC vibe to it, right?
Well, Shoot 'Em Down was a tribute to AC/DC. It was my first true AC/DC song. Like, what are they doing? You know, and I remember sitting there to the drummer, you know, no, man, no. Boom, da, and no, the bass player. And they all hated me for it because nobody's playing anymore because they didn't get it yet. Just the importance, it's not about you. It's about the effect you're having on the audience.
Right.
And, you know, you go to the AC/DC rhythm section, you know, in Rudd We Trust. You know, I saw some kid with a T-shirt on that said that. In Rudd We Trust.
That's
he had
awesome.
it made. And it is so true. I mean...
Brian Johnson once said, it's about these 5 average guys, but when they come together, they create this magic thing called AC/DC. There's something to be said about that rhythm section.
Cliff and Phil are just, I mean, one of the most incredible... They're a Ramones-like
Totally.
machine. And when you see For Those About to Rock... and which I saw in the theaters, you know, because that's, you know, when I came out in the movie theater.
Cool.
And they are putting on the braces and the tape.
Yes.
And these guys are going into battle because for 90 minutes or 2 hours, he's just doing da-da-da-da-da-da. You want to talk about tinnitus? You want to talk about tennis elbow? What do you think that's got to do to you?
Easily one of my favorite scenes from the film Let There Be Rock Live in Paris, where the band is about to go on stage and it looks like they're about to play a rugby match. Dee, I'm wondering if you could share a favorite story of how you might have seen AC/DC crossover or affect our culture in some way that our listeners might not know about. Is there a moment when you said, wow, everyone is taking note of this band now? For me, it was seeing a Gap commercial, maybe, 15, 20 years ago. It was on TV where this beautiful African-American woman by the name of Cherokee was playing Back in Black with a Gibson SG, and she looks into the camera and says, "My first love, Angus Young." And I was like, I stopped dead in my tracks and I said, wow, this has become a cultural shift here. Did you ever have any of those crossover moments?
Great AC/DC story. And let's talk about the crossover of these pretty unassuming guys, you know, from Australia by way of Scotland, you know, and not including Brian, of course, who's a Geordie. But I did a VH1 Classic special, and they had and was a Thanksgiving dinner, and they had gathered a whole bunch of people around the table, and it was Davy Jones from the Monkees. I remember Terry Nunn from Berlin. MC Hammer was there. I was there. I think Eddie Money. I was a real diverse. They've deliberately picked a diverse group of people. I was the host for this Thanksgiving dinner table, you know, sort of a round table, just conversation. And at some point, they asked each of us, what song would we want to be our, you know, remembered, not a song, our song that represents us, like our legacy would represent us. If you had to pick one song, it got to MC Hammer, and he goes, just one song. Dan,
No way.
and everybody at the table, Davy Jones and Terry Nunn and me, and the whole table start doing this, you know. And I said, man, you know, that's crossing over. That's reaching through ethnic barriers, age barriers. Davy's in his 60s. MC obviously is black. In case somebody didn't know, he's black. Terry Nunn, she's from a whole nother thing.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
Elvis is sitting there going like this, air guitar and shaking her head. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Back in the mid-'80s, when the PMRC were making waves about censoring music, you took a stand alongside Frank Zappa and John Denver, and kudos to you for carrying the flag for artists protecting their freedom of speech. But this committee was founded by 4 women known as the Washington Wives, one of which was Tipper Gore. they came up with a list called the Filthy 15, which featured Twisted Sister's We're Not Gonna Take It, correct?
We're Not Gonna Take It was on there, yeah.
But also, AC/DC's Let Me Put My Love Into You made that list, which compared to your We're Not Gonna Take It, was simply benign next to Let Me Put My Love Into You, Let Me Cut Your Cake With My Knife. You can't compare the two. How do you actually defend an AC/DC song with lyrics like that?
Yeah, AC/DC songs are lousy with double entendre. They are the kings. Well, if not the kings, certainly Whitesnake gives them a run for their money. Slide it in right to the top. Slide it in. Never go. Whitesnake. Hell, the band Whitesnake. That's very big with metal. Is double entendre. For an audience that's 95% dudes, which is another whole story. But that said, Twisted's music was none of those things. We're Not Gonna Take It was on the Filthy 15. They felt it should have a violence rating because they had seen the video and determined that if the video's violent, the song's violent, and that thus needs a V rating. I gave the senators the lyrics, and I said, feel free to read them. I said, they're no more violent than the Declaration of Independence. There's, fight for what you believe in, fight, it's just, isn't that what this country's all about? So, there was no denying that Brian's lyrics on Let Me Put My Love Into You was about fucking. It was like, and some of the band, that's why when I went there, I didn't try. I felt it was my place to defend other people's music. B, I didn't want to have to defend some other people's music. Not there's anything wrong with it, but there was no doubt about what Let Me Put My Love Into You is about, or Sink the Pink for that matter.
And now that you've had kids and they're grown, were you able to see Tipper's point of view of what she was trying to do? Or in your mind, was it all just a waste of time? And have you ever talked with Tipper about this whole event in music history?
I've never met Tipper face to face. We were, opposing sides and at the Senate hearings on censorship, on rating rock lyrics. I had a son at that time, and I'm proud to say there isn't one thing that I said that day that I don't stand behind 100% today. And not a lot of people can say that. That's because I've always tried to not do things that I would regret and think about my actions and stand by, so I could stand by them. So I'd love for them to bring me back for another round of discussions about not only about the idea of censorship, but how right I was about how wrongly their sticker would be used and what little it's done for their cause. My concerns were that it would be used as a way to eliminate product from the masses, and is exactly what it's been used for. And even beyond that, there are major chains that are forcing record companies to produce edited versions of the albums, and the buyer doesn't know it's edited. So the record buyer CD buyer goes to a store looking for a particular album, and you don't know you're getting a censored version of it. So you're not even hearing the artist's product or getting what they wanted.
Tell me the differences between a band like AC/DC and a band like Twisted Sister. Both made great strides in the early 80s, both straight ahead hard rock, but by the end of that decade, things got a little rough for that genre of music. How is that AC/DC was able to survive that and Twisted Sister not so much?
You gotta credit with AC/DC for myopicness, and an unwillingness to inflexibility, an unwillingness to change, or be affected by things happening around them, where I was once I had achieved stardom and made money and proved that I was somebody and got everybody's attention, it took the wind out of my sails, since a lot of my drive was about proving I was somebody. And as I've often said, I remember literally sitting poolside, my $1 million house, 5 cars two boats in the driveway, and I'm trying to write the lyrics to Summer Day. I'm trying to write the lyrics to my next big teen angst song, and I'm just like, I got nothing. Nothing. It's like, I'm not pissed off. I don't know. It's just, it's not coming out, But, AC/DC, whatever it is that drives them, whatever it is that pushes them, that's not changed. Success never changed that. And maybe they've never really become celebrities. They never become stars in the sense of, where you've seen them in the tabloids, or you see them on, Letterman, or where I was on, or presenting like I did the Grammy Awards. All of a sudden, Entertainment Tonight's doing stories on me and stuff like that. All of a sudden, I'm getting caught up in this sort of Hollywoodness, and they've just gone back home, wherever that was, and did their, and back to their normal lives. You say, how's AC/DC kept it alive? I guess there's a purity to what they do.
A purity to what they do, and a mystique surrounding the band, because they say yes to so little, which is why I love them in the first place. And to be honest with you, I wish they would say yes to Beyond the Thunder. That would be nice. Let's talk about cover songs. You took on a tremendous version of Sin City, as well as Walk All Over You, with Scott Ian on guitar, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Great selects there for sure. Any reason why you chose those particular AC/DC tracks out of the catalog?
Well, covering Walk All Over You it was Anthrax. They called me because they used to come see Twisted in the bars. And they grew up watching Twisted Sister. They knew I could sing that stuff. They're like, hey, I know I could do Bon Scott. It's funny because I still to this day, I'll get the call, Slash will call up. Hey, we're doing Camp Freddy, with Dave Navarro. We hear you can sing AC/DC. Yeah, I can sing. Could you come down and sing AC/DC? Yeah, let's go, man. I love singing AC/DC. So not everybody can do that anymore. As far as Twisted covering Sin City it was one of the songs we played in the clubs. I mean, I can remember we played a ton of AC/DC. Highway to Hell, Evil Walks, Dog Eat Dog, Dirty Deeds, Sin City.
Whole Lot of Rosie?
More than that. Rosie, Whole Lot of Rosie.
Which you also played live on stage with Brian Johnson, correct?
Yeah, we did. That was a great thing at a festival in England. Brian Johnson was there, and he came out and sang a whole lot of Rosie with Twisted, and and that was that was just a very cool thing to get to do.
And you have to understand, and I'm sure you know this, but that doesn't happen very often when a member of AC/DC either joins someone on stage or is joined on stage. So kudos to you. That's a huge honor. They didn't even want to play a grand finale at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they wanted nothing to do with sharing the stage. I'm surprised they even shared the stage with Steven Tyler, to be honest with you. But Brian's a fan of Twisted Sister, right?
Yeah, I think Brian's a friend, and I think he, watching Twisted, he appreciated our energy and our performance ethic. A lot of people, those who've seen us know. Those who haven't seen us have no clue. They sort of think they've got us figured out because the videos. Yeah, videos, those two songs. Yeah. But they don't realize that first and foremost, we're a performance-oriented band, and and working up a sweat is just part of the deal. Again, seeing Angus, a kindred spirit, thrashing his head, dripping, sweat flying off his body. There was a magazine, a local fanzine in Long Island called Kick-Ass Monthly. And back in 1978 or whatever, or maybe a couple of years later, but he said that Dee Snider and Angus Young invented headbanging. I wasn't headbanging. I was getting the hair out of my face, and I think Angus is probably doing the same thing. You throw your head forward and all the hair goes in, you go, oh crap, and you throw it back and it goes out, and you go, oh, throw it, and you go, yeah, and it's back forward and you go back, and it just becomes this thing,
Right.
And that became headbanging, but it really wasn't a thing before Angus did it. And I was proud, that I was getting cited a little bit in there too.
Here's a little known fact that both Angus Young and Dee Snider were born just 2 weeks apart, same year, same age. Both take on different personalities on stage. Angus with the schoolboy uniform, yourself in women's clothing and makeup. Both have alter egos, so to speak. Neither of you drink or do drugs, right?
Both teetotalers. Angus and I are both clean and sober, not drinkers, not partiers. Angus is one of those guys I really wish I had the opportunity to connect with more. I got to meet him once, and it is few people that I want to meet, impressed to meet, and Angus is on a very short list with Alice Cooper and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I wanted to bring up this quote I remember hearing. I think it was Courtney Love saying something to the effect that AC/DC are nothing more than vaudeville or a gimmick.
Well, there's one gimmick, and that's Angus. He has the rest of the band is just jeans and tees, and they always were. But Angus always had his schoolboy thing.
I think she saw the cannons and the bell or the train, the rosy inflatable, even the schoolboy uniform, as more important to the show than the music, potentially. How important is all of that to AC/DC's brand now, in your mind?
I never thought the schoolboy thing was that important to me, as a fan. It caught my eye at first. They're very diminutive, very little. I remember when Angus met my 7-year-old son, who was my whole family are AC/DC fans. It was about this big, and Angus walks in and he goes, "Hey, you're almost bigger than me." And it was true. He was. My struggle with meeting Angus was that here I was meeting a hero, and I realized I am towering over this guy,
right.
And I want to tell him how much his music means to me. I don't want to be looking down at him. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't want that sort of, because the looking down thing is almost authoritative. So I wanted to look him in the eye. So what I did was I noticed there was like a folding chair. So when they brought Angus over to meet me, I grabbed the folding chair and slid it over, and I put my foot up on it and leaned on it like this. I said, "Hey, Angus, it's great to meet you." And I was talking to him face to face. So the schoolboy outfit, look, it's not for me to judge. As a fan, as an original fan, he could have dropped that, many years ago, come out, on one of the albums without it, and I would have gone, yeah, okay.
Really?
He's thrashing around, but he obviously believes or thought there was a direct connection to it, to what he does.
I suppose it's a bit like Clark Kent, that mentality where the wardrobe puts you into another character emotionally.
There is something about donning garb that puts you into that place, and once when you do it regularly, it sort of triggers. It's an emotional and physiological trigger for you. So you're feeling like shit. It's you're on the road. It's a long day. Your throat hurts. Whatever. You're just not into it, and you start putting on the makeup and you start putting on the costume, and all of a sudden, it brings you. It connects you with that persona. So who knows? I mean, if that's the case for me, maybe it's the same way for him. Maybe coming off, and going on stage to thrash, he needs his thrashing clothes, and there's shorts and a little schoolboy outfit. And the funniest thing about the outfit I always thought was the hat, because the hat would, and there's a great video from France. If you've ever seen a bootleg of a French concert video, they open with live wire.
Yeah.
And he starts at the top. And you just starts with the little, it's awesome, dude. With the spotlight on the feet going shuffling, ding, 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 and he's going back and forth. And then all of a sudden he kicks in, he goes, "Hua!" And the hat just flies off, and that's the end of the hat. It's like, why even put it on, Or at least Brian should teach him how to balance it. Right. Brian's got it like moving around. Keeps the hat always steady.
Right. Every show, it's 2 seconds and it's gone.
Yeah, it's like, phew, it's gone.
Especially since Angus is now in his, let's call it, senior years. Even he's admitted to questioning himself about putting on that schoolboy uniform as he continues to get older and perform live. And personally and selfishly, I hope he never loses the schoolboy uniform. Do you ever feel that way, performing live in costume as you get older?
It's interesting. Angus having trouble putting on the schoolboy uniform. Having donned the Twisted Sister regalia and continuing to don it. I don't know if I have trouble doing it, but I'm marvel at it. And I do say, at what point, do you say, okay, enough?
Yeah.
I mean, I would think one thing is when you can't pull it off anymore physically. But there's certainly there's a number probably attached there somehow. With Twisted Sister, I say, it's a good news, bad news scenario. The bad news is we look like a bunch of aging drag queens. The good news is we always look like a bunch of aging drag queens. Nothing's changed. So it isn't like we were a bunch of pretty boys back in the 80s. Everyone's going, whoa, what happened? Which is what they're doing with a lot of the other bands. So some bizarre way, I'm pulling it off, but I totally understand Angus's dilemma. The reason I put this stuff on is because I think that's what the fans want. I mean, even though AC/DC is still very vital, certainly more vital than Twisted Sister, and contemporary than Twisted Sister, there's still a nostalgia element involved with AC/DC. This is the band of many people's youth, and they want the memory that we want Angus eternally to be the schoolboy.
Yeah.
That's a tough cross to bear.
Yeah, it is. So my background is as a creative director, art director, and I was truly fascinated by Bob Defrin's work as an art director packaging AC/DC's brand with these provocative album covers, sort of mysterious and evil, always a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But how important do you think his work was in corralling new fans? Did it pair with the music in your mind?
Certainly the artwork was eye-catching, and I actually remember seeing the High Voltage artwork, and it was just, really eye-grabbing. Angus, another thing we have commonality, the crazy faces and stuff, with the being electrocuted with wires coming out of his arms. It was like, whoa, what's that? So I mean, it's certainly, the artwork certainly spoke to the power of the band, the intensity of the band, and it's really, it's really kind of amazing that, in many ways, AC/DC is similar to Twisted Sister in that there was a sensational aspect of them, the craziness that has a tendency to overexpose you and burn you out. Certainly with Twisted Sister, it's that craziness that gets everybody watching you and checking you out, but after a while they get tired of it. And, and if there's not more there, as far as the audience is concerned, they move on. Yet AC/DC utilizing, we have this crazy little guitar player who's like a thrash machine, and we're playing these very basic songs, but that was their whole hook. I mean, I almost think that the record company didn't realize what they had. I almost think the record company, and nothing against Bob Defrin, but he was just like, there's nothing really here. These songs are pretty repetitive. They're pretty much the same song over and over. What are we gonna use to get people to check them out? Well,
yeah.
This kid's kind of crazy. He's a nutty kind of kid. Let's just let's bring that out.
That's funny.
Let's make that the focus. Hey, crazy guys in the band. Come see the crazy guy.
Yeah.
And to an extent, it worked. I mean, it certainly caught your eye.
Absolutely. As you know, every success story has its conspiracy theories, and AC/DC is surely not immune to those, especially surrounding the turn of events with the death of Bon Scott and the passing of the torch to Brian Johnson, both of who I treasure equally. But I'm curious if you've heard anything in this area that you'd like to share.
Did you know that Bon Scott picked Brian Johnson as his replacement at dinner at a club, after-hours club, with the guys in AC/DC? And I don't know if Geordie had performed or was on the road with them maybe, or what. But he says Bon Scott rolls up to the table with his arm around Brian Johnson, and he announces to the band, he says, if anything ever happens to me, this is my replacement.
Wow.
And it wasn't as simple as that. As you know, they auditioned a few people, but in the end, it was Brian. But Bon Scott, and it's kind of prophetic and a little scary that he would even think in terms of if something happens to me. And it was probably a joke, two drinking buddies or whatever. But it certainly wasn't a joke. Vocally, Brian was certainly cut out for the job. But Bon Scott picked Brian Johnson as his replacement.
That is some Twilight Zone stuff. AC/DC is a generational band now. You go to shows and you see grandparents and their grandkids at shows. I've taken my entire family a handful of times. Angus and Malcolm have actually touched my wife's pregnant belly backstage, which means my son has officially been baptized. But have you exposed AC/DC to your family as well?
AC/DC, this is a band that transcends generations. Its appeal is consistent, and so it's me, my wife, I've got my 15-year-old son, my 10-year-old son, my then 8-year-old son. I don't think our daughter was born yet at that point. And we've all got our AC/DC shirts on. And Cody, the youngest, we couldn't find him a little one, so my wife makes him an AC/DC shirt.
Cool.
So and we are just, the whole family, we're just on our feet, rocking. And and Cody wants to hear one song. It's Money Talks.
Huh.
He likes a lot of this song, but he wants to hear Money Talks. It's his favorite song. They don't play Money Talks. So now you got this 7-8-year-old kid, this cutest little blonde-head, mop-head kid, and he's really bummed. So his favorite band, and they didn't play his favorite song. And it's just amazing. How big is your band have to be to have so many hits, so much great material that you don't have time to play some of your biggest records? We're not going to do Money Talks because we don't have any time in the set. It was like a top 10 hit or something. It was big.
I think I've heard that they don't particularly like Money Talks that much. Brian once said it's a stinker to sing.
They don't like it?
Nah, I don't think so.
That's probably why they don't play it. But anyway, when Angus and the guys come back, Brian, everybody, and we meet him, I introduced Cody, and he's, oh, you're bigger than me. I said, yeah, he's a little bit bummed, guys. I said, because his favorite song is Money Talks, and he didn't play it, and he's a little bummed out. They're like, oh, we're sorry, we're sorry. Well, 2 weeks later, package arrives in the mail. It's a box about this big. It's to Cody. And Cody opens the box, and in it is about $1 million in Angus bucks.
Ha, that's great.
They used to drop those Angus bucks. So Cody, it's just for years, the house is just filled with Angus money. It's just like in the closets, in the plant. It's everywhere, Angus money.
That's pretty cool.
I just thought that was like a pretty cool thing, for them to recognize they disappointed this little kid and feel it and say, well, we're going to do a little something for him, make him cheer him up, so that was cool.
That story right there sums up AC/DC really well. It is and always has been about the fans for this band. They will do anything to go out of their way to make sure their fans understand how important they are. And quite frankly, the sole purpose behind Beyond the Thunder is to serve up those stories and discuss this common bond that we all share. And with that, Dee, we end our show with a final question that we ask all of our guests and perhaps try to figure out the eternal question of why AC/DC. If you had to describe AC/DC in one word, what would it be?
Driving.
AC/DC Beyond the Thunder theme song, Trailer Trash, written and performed by Gannon Arnold. VO talent by Bruce Jacobson. Cinematography and sound recording by Greg Ferguson. Edited and mixed by Eric Kiel. Brand ambassador and marketing guru Gino Bona. Written, directed, and hosted by Kurt Squires. Produced by Gino Bona, Greg Ferguson, Eric Kiel, and Kurt Squires. AC/DC Beyond the Thunder is a Squires LLC current motion production. Copyright Beyond the Thunder podcast. All rights reserved. This has been a Nat Attack presentation. Shazbot. Nanu Nanu.